Hello, everybody. This is the Theatric Dyspraxic. My name is Brandon, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. Um, I'm recording with a different microphone. Usually I just use video, whatever. Um, but I'm going to be, I'm sure the quality is not that great, and I'm sure this video is not going to turn out really that well, but I wanted to make it anyway. So I'm sorry for the lack of quality in the sound. I don't really have a good enough microphone or a space that's quiet enough. My room kind of echoes a little bit, and I'm not really apt at softwares that manipulate audio to sound a little bit better. I'm going to try to do what I can in Audacity to improve the quality of the sound if I can, but there's only so much that I can do, and I'm not really good with this kind of stuff. But this is going to be the beginning of a new series that I wanted to do. It's related to other things that I've done before with theatric readings, where I just read things. But I decided to do this because it was something I was interested in for a little while. I don't think a whole lot of other people are going to be interested in it, but it's just something I wanted to do, and so I've decided to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be reading chapters from certain books that I want to read. And the first one that I've chosen is the Autobiography of Charlie Chaplin, just because I've always found Chaplin to be a fascinating figure, but I also think that the book is really well written. The quality of the writing really paints the picture of Victorian London and the music halls that Charlie Chaplin performed in as a child and, before he entered the film industry. It's a great book, and I've read it a few times, and I decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it for you here, now. So without further ado, I hope that you enjoy, and again, it's not going to be perfect, so don't expect professional quality audiobook, because it's not what it's going to be, but it's just going to be me reading the best that I can. So we're going to get started. This is the prelude of the book. Before Westminster Bridge was open, Kennington Road was only a bridle path. After 1750, a new road was laid down from the bridge, forming a direct link to Brighton. As a consequence, Kennington Road, where I spent most of my boyhood, boasted some fine houses of architectural merit, fronted with iron grille balconies from which occupants could once have seen George IV coaching on his way to Brighton. By the middle of the 19th century, most of the homes had deteriorated into rooming houses and apartments. Some, however, remained inviolate and were occupied by doctors, successful merchants, and vaudeville stars. On Sunday morning, along the Kennington Road, one could see a smart pony and trap outside a house, ready to take a vaudevillian for a 10-mile drive as far as Norwood or Merton, stopping on the way back at the various pubs, the White Horse and the Horns, and the Tankard in the Kennington Road. As a boy of 12, I often stood outside the Tankard watching these illustrious gentlemen alight from their equestrian outfits to enter the lounge bar where the elite of vaudeville met, as was their custom on a Sunday, to take a final one before going home to the midday meal. How glamorous they were, dressed in checkered suits and grey bowlers, flashing their diamond rings and tie pins. At 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, the pub closed, and its occupants filed outside and dallied a while before bidding each other adieu. And I would gaze, fascinated and amused, for some of them swaggered with a ridiculous air. When the last had gone his way, it was as though the sun had gone under a cloud, and I would return to a row of old derelict houses that sat back off the Kennington Road, to 3 Pall Mall Terrace, and mount the rickety stairs that led to our small garret. The house was depressing, and the air was foul with stale slop and old clothes. This particular Sunday, Mother was seated gazing out of the window. She turned and smiled weakly. The room was stifling, a little over 12 feet square, and seemed smaller. The slanting ceiling seemed lower. The table against the wall was crowded with dirty plates and teacups, and in the corner, snug against the lower wall, was an old iron bed which Mother had painted white. Between the bed and the window was a small fire grate, and at the foot of the bed an old armchair that unfolded and became a single bed upon which my brother Sidney slept. But now Sidney was away at sea. The room was more depressing this Sunday because Mother had for some reason neglected to tidy it up. Usually she kept it clean, for she was bright, cheerful, and still young, not yet 37, and could make that miserable garret glow with golden comfort, especially on a wintry Sunday morning when she would give me my breakfast in bed, and I would awaken to a tidy little room with a small fire glowing, and see the steaming kettle on the hob and haddock, or a bloater by the fender, being kept warm while she made toast. Mother's cheery presence, the coziness of the room, the soft padded sound of boiling water into our earthenware teapot, while I read my weekly comic, were the pleasures of a serene Sunday morning. But this Sunday she sat listlessly looking out of the window. For the past 3 days she had been sitting at that window, strangely quiet and preoccupied. I knew she was worried. Sidney was at sea, and we had not heard from him in 2 months, and Mother's hired sewing machine with which she struggled to support us had been taken away for owing back installments, a procedure that was not unusual, and my own contribution of 5 shillings weekly, which I earned giving dancing lessons, had suddenly ended. I was hardly aware of a crisis because we lived in a continual crisis, and being a boy, I dismissed our troubles with gracious forgetfulness. As usual, I would run home to Mother after school and do errands, empty the slops and bring up a pail of fresh water, then hurry on to the McCarthys and spend the evening there, anything to get away from our depressing garret. The McCarthys were old friends of Mother's whom she had known in her vaudeville days. They lived in a comfortable flat in the better part of Kennington Road, and were relatively well off by our standards. The McCarthys had a son, Wally, with whom I would play until dusk, and invariably I was invited to stay for tea. By lingering this way, I had many a meal there. Occasionally Mrs. McCarthy would inquire after Mother, ask why she had not seen her of late, and I would make some sort of excuse, for since Mother had met with adversity, she seldom saw any of her theatrical friends. Of course, there were times when I would stay home, and Mother would make tea and fry bread and beef dripping, which I relished, and for an hour she would read to me, for she was an excellent reader, and I would discover the delight of Mother's company, and would realize I had a better time staying home than going to the McCarthys. And now, as I entered the room, she turned and looked reproachfully at me. I was shocked at her appearance. She was thin and haggard, and her eyes had the look of someone in torment. An ineffable sadness came over me, and I was torn between an urge to stay and keep her company, and a desire to get away from the wretchedness of it all. She looked at me apathetically. "Why don't you run along to the McCarthys?" she said. I was on the verge of tears. "Because I want to stay with you." She turned and looked vacantly out of the window. "You run along to the McCarthys and get your dinner. There's nothing here for you." I felt the reproach in her tone, but I closed my mind to it. "I'll go if you want me to," I said weakly. She smiled wanly and stroked her head. Yes, you run along." And although I pleaded with her to let me stay, she insisted on my going. So I went with a feeling of guilt, leaving her sitting in that miserable garret alone, little realizing that within the next few days a terrible fate awaited her.